London, 1912. The city was a powder keg of change, its air thick with coal smoke and the rising cries for women's suffrage. In this charged atmosphere, Scotland Yard Detective Inspector Thomas Riley found himself tasked with the unenviable job of policing the very women whose ideals in a secret corner of his heart he admired. His world was one of order, of cobblestone streets slick with rain and the heavy, predictable clang of Big Ben. Her world was a maelstrom of righteous fury and defiant hope. Her name was Eleanor Vance. He first saw her not in a drawing room, but on a soapbox in Trafalgar Square, her voice clear and cutting through the din of the crowd. She spoke of equality, of a future he had never truly considered, and her passion was as bright and dangerous as a lit match. Her cheeks were flushed, her hat slightly askew, and in her eyes he saw a fire that both captivated and unnerved him. His duty was to observe, to document, to report. But as he watched her, notebook in hand, he felt an undeniable pull, a sense of recognition that transcended his uniform. Their paths were destined to cross. A few days later, a protest march turned chaotic near Westminster. He was there to maintain the line. She was there to break it. In the crush of bodies and the swell of shouting, she stumbled. Instinct, not duty, made him reach out. His gloved hand caught her arm, steadying her. For a moment, their eyes met. His, a deep, troubled blue. Hers, a defiant, intelligent brown. In that fleeting instant, a silent conversation passed between them, an acknowledgement of the roles they were forced to play and the individuals trapped within them. He saw not just a suffragette, a troublemaker, but a woman of conviction. And she, perhaps, saw not just a policeman, an oppressor, but a man with a flicker of conflict in his gaze. He started seeing her everywhere, not by assignment, but by choice. He would find himself walking routes he knew she and her fellow activists frequented. He'd linger near the cafes where they planned their campaigns, catching snippets of their fervent discussions. He learned her habits, the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the determined set of her jaw before a speech. It was a dangerous private obsession, a tightrope walk over a chasm of professional ruin. He was a keeper of the law, she a dedicated breaker of it. An invisible line was drawn between them, as clear and unyielding as a prison wall. One rain-swept evening, he saw her huddled in a doorway near the WSPU headquarters, her protest banner soaked and drooping. She looked exhausted, the fire in her eyes banked to a low ember. On an impulse that defied all logic, he approached. He didn't speak of politics or protests. He simply offered his umbrella. She looked up, surprised, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes that quickly softened into weary acceptance. "Thank you, Inspector," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. He just nodded, his own voice caught in his throat. He walked beside her for a few silent blocks, the shared space under the umbrella a fragile, temporary truce. It was a stolen moment, a small act of kindness that felt like a grand betrayal of everything his world stood for. That small act cracked open the door. They began to meet in secret, in the foggy anonymity of London's parks, on quiet benches overlooking the grey Thames. He'd arrive first, his collar pulled high, a plain-clothed ghost. She would follow, her steps light, her face a mixture of apprehension and excitement. They talked for hours. He spoke of the rigid expectations of his job, the pressure from his superiors. She spoke of the fire that drove her, the sacrifices she and her sisters made for a cause greater than themselves. He saw the bruises on her arms from being manhandled at rallies. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes from long nights spent policing them. In these stolen moments, they were not Inspector and Suffragette. They were Thomas and Eleanor, two souls caught on opposite sides of a historical tide, finding a shared humanity in the quiet spaces between the battles. Their stolen joy, however, was built on precarious ground. Thomas's superiors were growing suspicious. His reports on the suffragette movement were becoming less clinical. He was omitting details, downplaying threats. His partner, a grizzled, cynical officer named Finch, began watching him with narrowed eyes. "Getting soft on the ladies, Riley?" He'd sneer, a joke with a sharp, dangerous edge. Finch was a company man, a believer in order above all else. He saw the suffragettes not as idealists, but as a cancer to be cut out. And he was starting to suspect that Thomas was compromised. The dread began to creep into Thomas and Eleanor's clandestine meetings. The joy was now tinged with fear. Every rustle of leaves, every passing stranger sent a jolt of anxiety through them. "They're watching me," Eleanor would whisper. "I can feel it." Thomas knew she was right. He could feel the net tightening around him, too. He was being followed. His loyalties were being tested. He had to make a choice. He could report what he knew about an upcoming major act of defiance Eleanor was planning, an act that would surely land her in prison for years and save his career. Or he could protect her and risk everything. The weight of this decision was a constant, crushing presence. The climax arrived on a cold November night. Eleanor and a small group of militants were planning to smash the windows of prominent government buildings on Regent Street, their most audacious act yet. Thomas knew the exact time and place. He'd pieced it together from overheard whispers and his own deductions, a secret he kept locked behind a stony expression. That night, as he stood with his fellow officers, batons at the ready, he saw Finch watching him, a smug, knowing look on his face. The trap was set, not just for the suffragettes, but for him. As Eleanor and her group approached, hammers concealed beneath their coats, Thomas's world narrowed to a single point. He saw her face, pale and resolute in the gaslight. He saw the future that awaited her, the violence of the arrest, the cold of a Holloway cell, the brutal ordeal of force-feeding. He couldn't let it happen. In a split second, as the order to advance was about to be given, he broke rank. He shouted a warning, a coded phrase only she would understand from their conversations. "The Nightingales are flying early." Confusion erupted. Eleanor froze, her eyes finding his across the chaos. Understanding dawned, followed by a look of profound, heart-wrenching gratitude. The element of surprise was lost. Whistles blew, officers charged, but Eleanor and her core group melted away into the darkness, forewarned. Thomas stood his ground, facing the furious, betrayed glare of Inspector Finch. He had made his choice. The aftermath was swift and unforgiving. Thomas was suspended, interrogated, and ultimately dismissed from Scotland Yard in disgrace. He lost his career, his reputation, his place in the world he knew. He was a pariah. A few weeks later, a small, unmarked envelope arrived at his new, modest lodging. Inside was a pressed flower, a violet, a symbol of the suffragettes, and a train ticket to a small coastal town with no return. There was no note, but none was needed. He knew it was from her. He packed a single bag. Standing on the platform at Paddington Station, he felt a strange sense of peace. He had lost everything, but he had also been set free. The future was uncertain, a blank page. But as he boarded the train, leaving the smoke and noise of London behind, he held onto a single, defiant hope, the hope of a new life. A life where he and Eleanor could finally exist outside the roles society had assigned them. A life where they were no longer Inspector and Suffragette, but simply Thomas and Eleanor. A bittersweet resolution, perhaps, but a resolution nonetheless. A quiet testament to a love that dared to defy an era. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more historical narratives. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.